The following production was created by Kaisen and Hahn. Hello. Today, we have Flying Wolf Claw from the Fierce Winds clan.
Hello there, Chief.
I'm your host, Educator. Today, we are going to talk about sustainable economic growth. Mr. Claw, what do you know about economic growth?
I know that in the season of the rain and flower blossoms, I trade 2 pelts for 1 seed of the corn. Then, in the season of changing leaves, I trade 1 stalk of the corn for 5 pelts of the great raccoon. Is this economic growth?
No.
Oh.
That is earning profit. Economic growth has to do with real GDP. Do you know what real GDP is?
Yes. That is my real god of divine porcupine.
Ha ha. Ha ha. Ha ha. That is incorrect. For review for returning viewers, real GDP is found on the x-axis of the aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph. It is comprised of consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Economic growth is defined to be the annual rate of change in real GDP. It is typically driven by productivity, which involves producing more output for the same amount of inputs. Economic growth is commonly viewed as being in the long run. The short-run variation of economic growth has been dubbed the business cycle.
Okay. So if during one frozen water season, 2 shaman warriors and I capture 4 horses, and the following frozen water season, as 3 warriors capture 5, we had economic growth happen.
Precisely. Your per capita output increased from one year to the next. If those horses had been your only output all year, then you experienced 25% economic growth. Now, the topic for today is the idea of sustainable economic growth. The main question is economic growth possible to sustain? What do you think, Mr. Wolfclaw?
Well, if my shaman warriors and I tried to continue the same rate of growth every season of frozen water, at some point the mother of all nature would cease to provide horses. So my compadres and I would not be able to sustainably experience economic growth. We would throw off the great balance of the flowing energy if all the horses were gone.
You have a very good point, and that argument is precisely that of the people that believe economic growth is not sustainable. The advocates of an economic growth argue that because there is a limited number of resources, excessive and drawn-out growth will harm nature and essentially halt further economic growth. The concepts are similar to that of Malthus, who supported the theory that exponential growth in a population would eventually run out of resources and death checks would reduce it.
Okay.
However, there are also people that argue in favor of sustainable economic growth. The optimists say that although localized environmental effects will occur, large-scale ecological effects are minor. They also believe that even if large-scale effects were to occur, human ingenuity would overcome them. Concerns of ecological effects gave rise to people who support a lower economic growth rate. In the 1990s, a scientist named David Suzuki from Canada claimed that ecologies could only sustain typically about 1.5 to 3% economic growth per year.
Wow, that is not very much. That is like harvesting 100 stalks of corn and then harvesting 103 stalks of corn the next year using the same amount of seeds.
Well said. That's it for today's edition of Let's Learn Economics. I'm your host, Educator, and thank you for watching.
Hoo, ha, ha.